The Cats head into Vancouver as it's going to be an incredible night where the Canucks honor Roberto Luongo. We're going to discuss that, how the Canucks got here, and the keys to victory.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, December 14th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show account on X at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So the Florida Panthers going into Vancouver tonight, as the Panthers had an off day. The way the practice schedule, by the way, is going to work out throughout this road trip is game, off day, no practice, game, off day, no practice. And I think that's really great for recovery and travel reasons, as the Panthers are still trying to get used to the time change as far as their body clocks, as far as these West Coast games. But before we get into all of that, the Panthers are going into this one, and we're going to spend segment number one just talking about our beloved Roberto Luongo, part of the front office with the Florida Panthers, but also Florida Panthers legend and Vancouver Canucks legend. He will be placed in the Canucks Ring of Honor tonight at Rogers Arena in Vancouver. I said the correct name of the arena, thankfully, because I feel like every Canadian arena is named after Rogers. I know there's 3 of them at least as well. But you think about with Roberto Luongo starts his career, picked 4th overall by the New York Islanders, traded to the Florida Panthers when the Islanders drafted Rick DiPietro. But after that trade, it was seen as one of it's probably still is the best trade still in Florida Panthers history, where you bring in a franchise goaltender and a future captain as well with Roberto Luongo and Olli Jokinen. Still maybe a little bit of a debate whether the Matthew Tkachuk, John Huberdeau trade is the best one. If the Panthers had won the cup, that would definitely be number one. But still need to get that job done in order to, in my opinion, to put the Tkachuk trade over that one, in my opinion. But when you think about when the Panthers, the first time around, as far as historically, with first 5 seasons, 317 games played, and facing 9,960 shots in that span for a 920 save percentage, including 2004, where he had 900 more shots against, more than the next guy, and he doesn't win the Vezina Trophy, which was a year that Martin Brodeur ended up winning the award. And this isn't the first time that Roberto Luongo was burned by Martin Brodeur winning a Vezina Trophy. It also happened in Vancouver, where he did not win the Vezina Trophy and finishes second, and also finishes second in Hart Trophy voting when he was with Vancouver, right behind Sidney Crosby. But also the era in which Roberto Luongo played the first go around before the 04-05 lockout. Even a year after, he's still playing a crap load of games, back-to-back seasons in between the trade between Vancouver and Florida. He's playing 75 plus games, but in the beginning of his time with the Florida Panthers, it's still a rebuild for them, getting the likes of Stephen Weiss, Jay Bouwmeester, Nathan Horton, but still not doing anything along the as far as getting the offensive scoring punch necessary for what Roberto Luongo was doing on his end. But then you think about 6 out of 8 years for Luongo in Vancouver playoffs, back-to-back President's Trophies, a Jennings Trophy, 367 wins in his time with Vancouver, being named a captain as a goalie, and putting the C on his mask, on his goalie mask, which is such a cool feature. Only Canucks goalie with 40 wins in his career, and also some of the heroic playoff performances as well. 2007 Game 1 of the West quarterfinals, 76 saves in the Vancouver Canucks win over the Dallas Stars before Henrik Sedin scored a quadruple overtime winner. It didn't last as long as the Florida Panthers Carolina Hurricanes game in Game 1 of this past year, but that Canucks game against the Dallas Stars was one of the longest in playoff history. 76 save right before Henrik Sedin got the game winner. Also 54 save performance in 2011, the year that they went to the Stanley Cup final. 56 saves on May 24th, 2011, where it was the clinching of the spot in the Stanley Cup final. Kevin Bieksa gets the double overtime winner as well. And in 2007, even though this came in a loss, 3 out of the 5 games in that series in 2007 against the Anaheim Ducks, 58 saves in that one, right before Scott Niedermayer, which ended up being Roberto Luongo's teammate on Team Canada for the Olympics, which was in Vancouver as well. So kind of hard to get that goal against in 2007, which ended up with the Ducks winning the Stanley Cup over the Ottawa Senators, which that Stanley Cup final had a crap ton of Hall of Famers: Teemu Selanne, Chris Pronger, Scott Niedermayer, Daniel Alfredson, all that. So just a playoff series filled with a Stanley Cup final filled with Hall of Famers. And unfortunately, Roberto Luongo did not reach the Stanley Cup final in that year as the Mighty Ducks, literally, were just too much for Roberto Luongo that year. But international career as well, winning gold in his own arena, the only player to ever win a gold medal in his NHL arena. That's a rarity also because of the fact that the NHL hasn't gone to the Olympics since 2014. So still, we're hoping that they can get back in 2026 when it does return. I believe it's in Italy. I'm going to double check that, but I'm very sure it's in Italy for the 2026 Olympics as well. But you think about when he returns to South Florida, they were starting a little bit of their rebuild. We know Tim Thomas was not necessarily happy with the trade. I know that Tim Thomas defeated Luongo in the Stanley Cup final, and everything that happened with the fan base after the 2011 final too, which we won't discuss here. But a franchise legend coming back, and then a little bit of hope with Luongo in the mix. The Barkov, Huberdeau, Ekblad trading for Jaromir Jagr and the veteran presence. The Panthers were hoping to get that young team as far as getting to that next step as well. And even in 2016, getting up to 4th in Vezina Trophy voting as well. And the least of the Panthers' issues in the 2016 playoffs against the New York Islanders before falling in 6 games, where John Tavares got the overtime winner, which, crazy enough, John Tavares got his 1,000th point in his NHL career on the road against the New York Islanders as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but not in the same barn that he played in, with the Islanders getting a new arena, but still against the former team, and the booze raining down on John Tavares. But still, with Roberto Luongo, just the fact that the Panthers still have kept him around, still part of the front office and all, and even was the general manager for Team Canada at the IIHF Worlds in 2021, where Canada brought home gold that year as well. So a lot of on the ice and then on the ice too. And it's love the fact that NHL franchise, whenever it's a guy being honored, whether it's a jersey retirement, ring of honor against a specific team, which there's connection. We saw the jersey retirement in Florida against his hometown Montreal Canadiens and all. Patrick Hornqvist recently against his former team in the Pittsburgh Penguins, and now in the ring of honor for the Vancouver Canucks against the Florida Panthers, 2 teams that he's also very connected in throughout his career. And just you feel like everything individually that Roberto Luongo deserved so much more. Vezina trophies, Stanley Cup championship, and all. But he did get Olympic gold, which is one great thing for Roberto Luongo's career. But but still, and And not only that, but just someone who's so beloved in both fan bases. And for me personally, the biggest impact that Roberto Luongo had was after everything that happened in Parkland, where he stood in front of the crowd in Sunrise and spoke, as far as, even though he couldn't take the lives back of the 18 who died, that he brought a glimmer of hope and community and unity for this region when that tragic event did in fact happen in Parkland, unfortunately, on February 14th of 2018. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more about how the Vancouver Canucks got here and their incredible turnaround that they've had this season, as they are basically a playoff lock. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And if you want to take a chance on this Sunday's NFL action, where the Miami Dolphins will be welcoming the New York Jets to town, and if you think that Tyreek Hill could get under a certain amount of yards due to his injury, you might want to place that bet on FanDuel. If you think that someone like Jalen Waddle is going to step up with Hill's injury, you could place an over-under on amount of yards that he's going to get as well. And you could do that all with FanDuel. And you could visit fanduel.com/lockedon and place your bets, as we are in the push for the NFL postseason. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Segment number 2 here on this Thursday, December 14th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. And with the Vancouver Canucks, when we think about how they got here and some of the biggest, not necessarily surprises, but a team that we did not expect to get to where they are right now, as far as towards the tops of the Western Conference and the Pacific Division as well. There was always a lot of people, including myself, looked at the Canucks and said, that's a very young team with a lot of talent, but the potential is not there. Why does that, that the potential is there? Sorry. Why does that sound so familiar? Because even prior to 2021, the Florida Panthers were kind of in that territory, no pun intended. And it's kind of the same thing with the Canucks right now. This season, specifically for the Canucks, kind of reminds me of 2021 with the Panthers. They were starting to get into a lot of the core were starting to get into their mid-20s, and now starting to make their impact and take over games. As far as that, as far as what's happened before, Jim Benning comes into the mix in 2014. Funny enough, he was the assistant general manager for the Boston Bruins when they did, in fact, beat the Vancouver Canucks in the Stanley Cup final in 2011. And 2 playoff appearances in 8 years. Lots of top picks, but not like in the top 3 like the Florida Panthers had. So this was a team that was trying to remain somewhat competitive, but not fully mailing it in as far as trying to get a top pick and tank. So you get guys like Elias Pettersson, a Quinn Hughes, a Bo Horvat. I know Bo Horvat was before the Jim Benning era. He was 1 year before Jim Benning took over, but he was a big part of that team for a long time. And then you have guys who don't work out and were top picks and have maybe off the ice issues, like a Jake Virtanen or an Oli Olevi, which the Florida Panthers actually took a flyer on. They gave him a little bit of a chance, but when you don't nail two of those picks or people get in trouble off the ice, that can set your franchise back possibly years for them. And it took a while for them to get their footing and all. But once again, parallels. There's just so much parallels as far as that. And four head coaches, as far as in this era, right before Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin were part of the mix. Willie Desjardins, Travis Green as well. And then with that, also, let's also not forget that once again, towards the 2021-22 season, the Vancouver Canucks were trying to spend to the cap, but the wins were not reflecting. The Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson were up for a contract at the same time. Hughes takes a 6-year deal. Elias Pettersson takes a bridge and says we're going to reevaluate in a few years. That contract's about to be up. Thankfully, he's an RFA for the Vancouver Canucks, so there is a chance for him to still stay. So, with the Vancouver Canucks and Jim Rutherford coming into the mix, think about Jim Rutherford, and we should be thankful as Florida Panther fans for Jim Rutherford, because the Jared McCann and Nick Bjugstad trade, clearing up that cap with a year left on both of their contracts at the 2019 trade deadline, that created that cap room for Sergei Bobrovsky. So that trade with Pittsburgh, they don't bring Sergei Bobrovsky if it's not for that. And bringing in Patrick Hornquist to change the culture of the Florida Panthers when Jim Rutherford was still with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So that's another thing as far as that. And when the thing is, if you're a Vancouver Canucks fan and you see Jim Rutherford talk to the media, you are nervous, more than likely, when he steps in front of a microphone and talks, because sometimes he just tips too much of his hand and tells more than he should. And that happened a lot last season with the whole Bruce Boudreau situation, which I thankfully was able to meet Bruce Boudreau during the Stanley Cup final last year when he was working for NHL Network and all. And we happened to be in the same elevator. Really nice guy, very likable coach as well. And with that as well, thinking that Boudreau wasn't his guy, and then all the rumors, admitting to it kind of, but also wanting his own guy, Rick Tocchet, an assistant coach with Mike Sullivan back in Pittsburgh. Rick Tocchet was the guy he wanted the whole time. And just a lot of awkwardness too, as far as what Rutherford was saying publicly. And also, let's not forget that last year the NHL and TNT were joking around with Rick Tocchet while he was on the panel as the rumors were flying, and it was just awkward. And I wasn't in the room, but just watching on TV, I'm just like, this is just strange. This is weird and all. And but Rick Tocchet, as far as this season, he is not afraid to bench stars and keep guys accountable. JT Miller, who's had plenty of experience throughout his time in the NHL, New York Rangers, Tampa Bay Lightning, he's been benched a few times as well. Andriy Kuzmenko as well. He's on the fourth line, but he's still getting. But whenever the Canucks do go on the power play, he's up there as far as that. So, and also decisions on what you're going to do as far as bringing in guys like keeping guys in. Are you going to choose Bo Horvat, a guy that was drafted and was had the C on his sweater for a long time, or you're going to keep Brock Besser, and Brock Besser has 21 goals on the season, and Bo Horvat, even though the New York Islanders are doing a lot better, it looks to be better for both situations, as the New York Islanders are starting to turn things around, which it's hard to recognize the New York Islanders right now as a team that's not really defensively savvy as they were a few years ago. But this version of the Vancouver Canucks, they do not have to pay everyone yet. Where Phil Hronek is a few years away from getting a payday, which him and Quinn Hughes, that has been one of the best D pairs in the entire league. We speak about guys like Jake Wallman, Moritz Seider, Devon Tays, and Cale Makar, but Quinn Hughes and Phil Hronek is a big part of what makes that line roll. And thankfully now, for Jim Rutherford, Patrick Allvin, the actual general manager, is now doing all the media availabilities, or at least most of them, and he's not telling too much or telling more than he should. So the winning is definitely helping. And as far as not bringing in a lot of noise is definitely something that is definitely helpful if you happen to cheer for the Vancouver Canucks. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss the numbers, the previous matchup between the Canucks, and how the Florida Panthers can get one step closer to a 500 road trip. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our partners at AG1. The number one most important thing is for your health and to have a lot of energy. Yes, with AG1, it's a daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. And I drink it literally every day because sometimes I need a little bit of a break from the coffee. And on a night like tonight, where puck drop for the Florida Panthers is at 10 p.m. and I have to do a show after, I choose to drink AG1 in order to keep me awake and energized. You can drink AG1 in the morning or in the afternoon, but in this case, could be later at night. So, and it makes me feel great, and it is something that I feel that is beneficial for you guys. And all the great athletes have one thing in common: they take care of their bodies, and a huge part of it starts with optimizing whole body health. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL Network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL Network. Check it out. Segment number 3 here on this Thursday, December 14th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. So, the Vancouver Canucks 11-3-1 at home, while the Florida Panthers are 8-5-2 on the road this season. But man, what the Vancouver Canucks do offensively is just fun to watch. They can score in bunches. A lot of the guys that they have, even though plus minus isn't the be all end all stat, a lot of the top plus minus guys in the NHL come from two teams, the Florida Panthers and the Vancouver Canucks. So something's got to give as far as this matchup as well for the Canucks. 3.83 goals per game, which is first in the NHL, fourth in goals against at 2.55. Lethal power play, but one of their biggest weaknesses as far as this team is their inability to kill off penalties. They're 25th in the NHL at 75.8. So keep an eye on that as far as that. But here's the thing: you think that with the amount of goals that this team scores, that it would come with high shot volume, and that's not the case for the Vancouver Canucks. One of the lowest teams as far as shots for per game at 28%. And there's this one little analytic term that's thrown around for the Vancouver Canucks as far as their success this season. That stat is PDO, which is shooting percentage plus save percentage. And a lot of the talk is that the Vancouver Canucks are riding the PDO wave. And one thing I will say is, as far as that, is that this team can slow the game down when necessary, cycle the puck, and wait for their quality chances as well. It's more of the quality, not quantity. Yeah, if they're down in a playoff series, and even down in a playoff game where it's 2-1, it's not going to do you any good if you're not getting a lot of shots on net. So, but that's a problem that the Vancouver Canucks are going to deal with when they get there. Corsi for percentage is just under 50%. So when you're leading the league in goals for, when your Corsi is under 50, that also speaks volumes on what you're doing on the ice. And it's also about reliable backup behind Thatcher Demko. If Thatcher Demko is not having a good night, he's only been pulled once this whole season. And Casey DeSmith has identical numbers as far as save percentage, 917 to Demko's 918 as well. And also the complementary depth pieces that the Vancouver Canucks brought to the mix as well. Sam Lafferty is one of them, being on that top line wing with Elias Pettersson. Nikita Sidorov, I know he's a journeyman. I know he's been on his 6th NHL team at 28 years old, but the dual eligibility that he has, and the guy who's gets in front of pucks and closes gaps as well. So that is a trade that Patrick Allvin, as far as bringing in some toughness, Nikita Zadorov is something that is a piece that he feels was necessary. And also Calgary is a crossroads as well, as not a lot of people want to stay. We're still wondering about the likes of Noah Hannafin, Elias Lindholm as well. So there's still a lot of question marks as far as them. But that's where. But hey, they say one man's trash is another person's treasure, right? And the Vancouver Canucks, as far as that, they are thriving. And we spoke about Phil Peronik earlier as well. Also, more complementary pieces on their bottom six. Teddy Bluger, who was with the Pittsburgh Penguins last year, which familiarity with Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin. And another part of that is Connor Garland, as far as bringing him in from the OEL trade as well, which OEL is hopefully for him. He's looking to have a great game as in his first visit back since being bought out, but also question marks on whether Connor Garland is going to be part of the mix as well in the future. But as of now, he's still a Vancouver Canuck. But also, one thing I did not mention, Tanner Pearson. There was a lot of when it comes to Tanner Pearson and his medicals, as far as everything. He felt like that he got the wrong info and wrong medical advice when he during his time with the Vancouver Canucks. So that's also another off the ice issue that the Vancouver Canucks had prior to this season, and they are hoping to turn their fortunes around. Last meeting between the Florida Panthers and the Vancouver Canucks, October 21st, 2023 in Sunrise. Casey DeSmith in net, and the Panthers with this one never led in this one. 2 power play goals early, which Elias Pettersson was all over this game. One via a screen on that first one, and then the third goal where the Panthers were trying on the forecheck, and then a backhand pass to Elias Pettersson in the slot to make it 3-1 at the time. The Panthers did make it a game right before the Vancouver Canucks scored with about 4 minutes left. But Sam Reinhart got 2 goals in the night, and he loves playing the Vancouver Canucks, his hometown team. He is from West Vancouver either way. 11 goals and 11 goals, 5 assists, 16 points in 15 games career-wise, and a 35.5% shooting percentage. There is no other team that he has over 25% shooting percentage other than Vancouver. Do you want to know what the next closest team is as far as shooting percentage for Sam Reinhart against a specific team? It's the Florida Panthers during his time with the Buffalo Sabres. So safe to say that the Panthers are very happy to have Sam Reinhart on their team as well. Also, another thing of note is Gustav Forsling. I know it's been a while for Gus. It's been almost 10 years since he got drafted by the Vancouver Canucks. He'll be making a return to Vancouver. I mean, he was traded less than a year after he was drafted, so there's not really much of a connection there for Gus and the Canucks, other than being drafted before traded to Chicago as well. So, and this is a battle of the goals, points leaders as well. Rhino has a little bit of work to do as far as getting up in the Rocket Richard race, especially with Brock Besser getting a hat trick the other night against the Tampa Bay Lightning, with who did not have Victor Hedman the other day. So there's still a lot of work to do for Sam Reinhart in order to get to the top of the Rocket Richard race. But going to be a fun night as far as that, where hopefully the Florida Panthers are coming out with a win in this one. But as far as keys to victory, as far as the Panthers, it's really comes down to possess the puck more in your end, which easier said than done, which the Vancouver Canucks are going to, as far as high danger chances, they do it more in quality over quantity as far as that. So if you can keep the puck away from your zone, even better. And another thing for the Panthers is score on the power play, with the Vancouver Canucks being in towards the bottoms in the penalty kill. This is where more than likely this game could be won or lost. And we saw last game where no shots on goal on 3 power play opportunities. This could be that one game where you say you have to wake up in this one. It's not an easy task. Vancouver is second in the Pacific as far as that, and looks to be a big giant as far as, no pun intended, because there's the Vancouver Giants of the WHL, but they are a big giant in the Western Conference and the Pacific Division. And with the Panthers, it's not gonna be easy at all for this one. But with the Panthers and their record after losses, this is going to be a very exciting game. It might not be the most tempoed game as far as that, but you are definitely going to see, as far as the Vancouver Canucks, they're going to get their scoring chances, and they're also going to stop a lot of pucks, because the Panthers have been shut out 3 times, and the Vancouver Canucks have 3 shutouts too. They've shut out their opponents 3 times, excuse me. So hopefully the offensive scoring punch for the Florida Panthers does come alive in this one, and it really, really starts with special teams tonight, 10 o'clock Eastern, and we will be back tomorrow to recap all that with Nick Fairbanks for another edition of Fairbanks Friday. So make sure to come back for tomorrow's edition of the show, as we will recap all that and more. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.